Hey guys, what's crackin'? Godsman here, coming at you with the tier list video for Clan Collection Volume 5 and 6. I said this would come, but it came a little bit late due to some shenanigans on Bushy's end. Mainly the fact that there was supposed to be a ban list that a lot of us were expecting, but that got pushed back till July, I believe. So, heck, I waited for nothing, I suppose, because I was like, you know, maybe there's a couple problem children on this list that we're going to receive like some sort of hit in order to just deal with the current meta. But alas, we'll have to wait for a while, us English players, so F it, we're just going to do it now. Now, a couple of ground rules as per tradition in these tier list videos that I make. The first one being, of course, how am I going to rank these? So I'm going to rank these cards based on impact. And what that means is it refers to not just how strong a card is, but also how likely is it to see play in a deck and in a clan and in the meta and whatnot. So for instance, a card could seem pretty good on paper, but if a deck's not going to use it, then it's not going to have much of an impact. Contrarily, if you have a card that seems just decent, but it definitely is going to see play in the deck and it boosts the deck potential, then it's going to have a higher impact. So that's just going to give us sort of a ground rule with regards to what exactly am I ranking here. The second rule, though, is going to be V Premium. Yes, this is a list that judges these cards based on their V Premium implications. Now, I understand that there's a lot of premium viewers out there, and yes, premium is a really kick-ass format. There's a lot of premium implications here. So I will give shoutouts to some cards that have like especially high premium implications, but those are just going to be basic, quick shoutouts, nothing more for the most part, because I want to keep this as close to V as possible since that is my main format, and it's what I want to appertain to. And, well, that's about it for the rules. Now then, let's move on to the first reveal. So, starting off, we've got a pretty strong one right here. We got the Genovius ride line. So yeah, Ripples came to V finally, RIP Transcore, but this was a pretty good trade-off for Transcore, not gonna lie. So right off the bat, I just want to mention before I go into like my main thoughts, this is one of the premium cards, and yeah, here's the thing. There's a card named Odysseus, and it lets you ride Genoviuses from the deck, and it's not even necessarily like a once per turn if you have multiple Odysseus's. So you can Excel spam, and then also spam the field with Genovius's first effect, yada yada yada, busted in premium, needs to get hit at some point. I just wanted to bring that up really quickly. Yeah, so Aqua Force Tier 0 confirmed, we'll have to wait and see. Anyway, so on to the V stuff. Ripples is still pretty strong. Now, as a ride line, they are somewhat splashable, pun totally intended, but they're not terribly splashable. The real strength of the ride line, though, comes with its consistency and also just how complete of a package is it. So the Ripples, right? 1 searches out 2 and 3, the 2 searches out the 3 as well, and the 3 just does a lot of kick-ass stuff by calling off the top 5. So there's a lot of searchability going through these cards, and they're very affordable. They're not overly costed, and they're also not hard to achieve, so it's a very solid lineup that way. And the other thing to mention about Ripples is that Genovius as a card is a really important unit in Aqua Force. Here's the thing. With Aqua Force, one of the things about this clan in general, especially in V, is that it's very piece reliant. And what that means is if you don't have all your pieces, you're going to suffer offensively. You're not going to be able to like set up the biggest offense you possibly can. And generally speaking, with an Aqua Force deck, you have to balance your pieces along with your utility and aggression options. Things like your restanders and big beaters, not bitters, have to contend with other like consistency pieces just to make sure that you go off as consistently as possible. With this, that's not necessarily that much of a problem, because let's keep in mind, a lot of your restanding is going to come from Genovius himself because of his limit break skill. And so for this reason, a lot of your cards can simply be beaters because he's going to do all of the restanding for you. You can still, of course, run Terrific Coil, and I would suggest running things like Terrific Coil and Propulsion Dragon. But in addition to that, since you have more or less confirmed restands as long as you have limit break for your entire freaking field, yeah, it's pretty localized, your ability to set out a good offense. So yeah, it's a very, very consistent version of Aqua Force, and it has good power output. Not sure exactly what you're going to do in terms of trigger lineup. I like fronts, but then again, crits are, as usual, high potential and high reward. But one thing that is sure is that this deck's ability to run like beaters reliably, such as Riptide, Valeria, Coral Salt. That's really good stuff. So yeah, it's going to definitely be going in here. Now, moving on to Kyriel. So Kyriel is pretty solid unit too, but not necessarily the most solid. I'd say she goes into the pretty good. So Kyriel is an intriguing card, and this also goes for her other angel feathers. And I want to mention that a lot of these cards are going to not just be representing the one card in the picture, but also the cards that came with them. Some of them are individual, but others of them are part of like a package that the clan got, so do keep that in mind. So with regards to angel feather, this is package. So the Kyriel package is basically an extension of what Malkuth started in Angels, which was the Protect 2 side of things, and it does pretty good. So talking about Kyriel, there's a lot of power here with this unit, really solid potential, because what you get is multi-attack for 5 attacks a turn, along with the ability to marker spam somewhat. And most importantly, you're able to field extra units from the damage zone and then deal yourself additional damage. This means you get rescue checks, that's cool, on top of being able to field additional units, not just for power, but also for utility and regaining your lost board. So in a sense, this is sort of what Gavriel should have been, if you ask me. It's what old Gavriel does, and it does it very splendidly. Now, of course, this, along with the Grade 2 and the Grade 1, are very Protect 2 reliant, and that has its ups and downs. It does mean that this deck has a fair bit of a balance between offense and defense. You're getting boosts to both your shield and your power, especially with the rescue checks and also the use of amputation angel. More on that in a bit. But downside is that you're incentivized to then use your field for intercepting, and it lends itself to the biggest problem in this clan, which is it doesn't have that consistent access to its pieces. Sure, okay, you can put stuff in the damage zone and come out in the field, but if they're gone, then you're gonna have to find a way to like get more strong attacks out, or this deck is going to start to lose a lot of its impact. So it doesn't feel as steady as something like Malkuth, but it is more offensively inclined than Malkuth, I'd say. Its access to Amputation Angel, though, is absolutely huge, because that means it actually does have a win con in the rear guard. So overall, it's pretty good, but I think more dedicated support will unlock this deck's true potential. So speaking of true potential, let's move on to Duos. So Duos is going to this tier as well, but it's above Kyriel. Here's why. So Duos is a little bit more like consistent of a deck than Kyriel is, like very consistent, like Bermuda levels of consistent, as if that wasn't like unsurprising enough. But there is still the issue that there's not a lot of duo names, and so the duo gimmick is a little bit hard to pull off that like all the time. The duo gimmick, of course, just for those of you who may not know, is that you get effects based on having a card in your bind zone. So if, for instance, with the main Vanguard, she pitches in order to restand, but she loses a drive. If the card she pitches has a copy of itself in the bind zone, you can then call it to rear guard to get even more multi-attack. And so you have other effects that are sort of like this. The problem is that the bind element of Bermuda and V is more or less what the Prism thing was, but Prisms don't work well with duos, not very much. Some people were afraid that this was essentially Prism support, but I will tell you guys straight up, the only like card out of the 3 duos that Prisms could reasonably use is the Grade 1, and that's just to add a little bit more draw power, which is cool, of course, but it's not necessarily like some big whopping upgrade to the deck, so chill your horses there. However, duos on their own still has a really impressive Vanguard. Rias can definitely mess people up. The only issue is that this deck's potential is still a bit locked. It needs more duo representation, in my opinion, in order to like really push up there. As of now, as its own deck, you know, they're just like right in the middle, right? Like they're really solid. It's just that they're not really solid to say that, you know, oh, this is just a big boost to the clan or whatever. It's just more like a side option to your other Bermuda decks, which is why I'm not putting it up there, because Bermuda is already a really solid clan as it is. So something not so solid is Ammon. Problem with Ammon Reverse being that for its effect being like kind of neat, I suppose, it's not very relevant in the deck that's intended for, being Ammon. Among Us, just had to say that once. So this is what I was talking about before with impact. The impact of Ammon Reverse is relatively low, because even though the card is kind of a +2 when you think of it, and it also does have like decent stats when you build it up, the problem here is that it has low impact because its deck will not use it very often. Ammon already has a lot of solid Grade 3s. You have good finishers such as Hope on Dam and Castile. And you also have good utility Grade 3s such as your good old Gildere, and of course Number of Terror. So with all these different grade 3s running around that just feel like better options overall than Amon Reverse, he doesn't really have like that much going for him. Now, the one thing that's a saving grace from him being just straight up bottom of the barrel, and this is to my opinion, as we go further down the list, he's going to be like further down, so he's just barely in the meh. The thing about Amon Reverse is that he does substantiate, like, or rather just like incentivize running only Amon. So if we do get more Amon cards and they're specific to Amons, you will be more incentivized to run him, albeit as things stand, you need some serious support in order to make the reverse playstyle like more impactful. So that's where I stand with it. Mysticosta, good Metal Borg support. He's going right here, and it's just for that reason, right? You know, he adds consistency to Metal Borg as well as giving them like a bit more power, and it has a neat little premium implication because giving 5k to a Legion means you're giving 10k essentially. The only thing about Mist Ghost though is that it's a Metal Borg card, and Metal Borgs aren't that impactful, so I'm really putting him here because even though he's pretty good, I really want to emphasize the needs more to unlock potential. If Metal Borgs got more support, then this would definitely be an awesome piece for them. But as things stand, it's more like a godsend that doesn't do much. It just has like somewhat of an impact. So another Dimension Police card, but this one's a bit better, is the Enigman Storm. So Enigman Storm is a little bit more controversial because people look at his skill and you fall in one of two camps. Camp 1 says that Enigman Storm is pretty costly because you don't get any drives on the second attack and you have to pitch a couple cards for it. And also it's the only Enigman, so it needs to be buffed up to 50k without presumably having its own skill, and without boosting necessarily. So you need to boost it with other cards such as Twin Order and Kaizard, and you need to pitch 2 and then don't get drive, so you're losing cards. Yes, that is true, but then you look at Camp 2. Camp 2 says that this card is actually pretty sweet because simplicity is strength. It gets a crit, it gets a drive, and it gets the ability to restand for nothing more than a couple discards. That's the thing, it doesn't counterblast or soul blast for this. So when all it's doing is dealing with just your hand economy and not like things like counterblast, you can't really get denied out of Enigman Storm. And it also isn't restricted to your opponent being grade 3 or greater, so it's pretty fast. One of the big boons in Enigman Storm's favor is not just the fact that we should get more Enigmans to bump them up in the future, hence the whole unlock potential once again. The other big thing about Enigman Storm to keep in mind is that now he combos with Brad Black, a really good Vanguard, to get 3 Vanguard attacks. You just use Brad's effect, ride over him with this, which Brad can search off top 7, making this pretty consistent, and then this guy just swings twice. Of course, he like loses a drive on an attack, but also keep in mind that he gains a drive by his own effect, so it balances that out. And then on top of that, he gets 10k, which helps fulfill his 50k like requirement, and you get another force marker for superior riding. So this is all like a really solid combo. Now with Brad, you do need to wait until your opponent's grade 3 or greater, but that's where I'm going to segue into the next card, which is Dark Dimensional Robo Reverse Dayusha. So see, Reverse Dayusha also has a grade 3 combo, and that's why I wanted to throw him in real quickly, because Enigman Storm I think is really great and can go like up here when he gets more support, but as it stands, he just has the solid makings of a unit on paper. This card is somewhat of like a similar but opposite situation because it belongs in a very established deck, but what it grants to the deck is a little bit more middling. It is, in fact, another superior ride during the battle phase in a deck like Dimension Police, which has always been Vanguard based, but there's a couple stipulations. For one, if you wanted to get 3 Vanguard attacks with this, which you can, you'd have to wait until turn 4 because it combos Great Dayusha, which needs to wait until turn 4. Yeah, that's pretty good. Not gonna lie, that is pretty good when it goes off, because once it does go off, you do gain card advantage. Great Dayusha, after all, is a +1 in card advantage. You ride, but you still get Twin Drive. And then this one is just a break even when you're riding it, and then it swings for the drive. The thing is, that costs 2 counterblast, and you have to wait till turn 4, and you need to have both of those specific grade 3s in your hand and only attack with dimensional robos that turn. So it's very specific, and that can be problematic, and it's also a little bit costly. So that's just some things to keep in mind. Also, its main like its main skill when you're just doing it during the main phase. Yeah, its act is okay. Minusing 10k is cool, can work with Zeal and stuff, but you have to lock D robos, which can be a pain sometimes depending on your build. So do be careful. He's just pretty good, you know. I'm not gonna say he needs more unlock potential. It's just that he's just pretty good. He's pretty decent. You might run a copy or two of him. You could run a lot of it if you're really dedicated and full blown D robo. But aside from that, it's more up to you. So 7C's got support. Yeah, I know, big shocker, right? Super surprising, but they're actually pretty good support, so I'm actually going to put them here. And let me also take this opportunity to just specify that as I'm building this list, I am going to be moving things up or down in the tier. The closer they are to the left, the stronger. The right, the weaker. In general, that's my idea. But it's the real like tiers that are like the big difference. Anyway, so back to 7C's. These are pretty solid cards. They are. The Whale, a big beater in a deck that requires on hits to function, is a good idea, and it gets back your units, albeit removing a marker is rough for that cost. It is rough, but it's still a great card that way. And of course you got the grade 2, which is honestly kind of the MVP. With the grade 2, you counterblast 1 and then you mill top 5. Now milling top 5 is pretty solid. You can mill top 4 and then get like the 5th card being a freaking 7C's as well. So it's either mill 4 and +1 or it's mill 5. Albeit it's a counterblast, so that's really impactful, but still, that's really good. Not just in 7C's, mind you. It's also good in Negrobolt and cards like that who really require you to mill a lot, because then this is just sort of an alternative to Sea Skeleton if you don't happen to hit your Sea Skeleton Navigators. So yeah, overall these are a great boost to 7C's, and the only thing is that I think 7C's still could use a little bit more to go all the way, because they haven't really made up for the weakness of their gimmicks so much. They've leaned into it a little bit more, but the only thing they've done to make it up for the most part is just the mere fact that the Whale is pretty big. But still, it's pretty good stuff. Like, I'm not gonna like knock it for that. Okay, so moving on, we've got another pretty great card, which is the Steam Maiden support, featuring Retroactive Time Maiden Lulu. So these cards are pretty cool, in all honesty. Going over the Steam Maiden support first, which is the grade 2 and the grade 1, which yes, I know the grade 4 is a Steam Maiden support, but I'm going to save it for last because she also has a lot of generic implications. Grade 1 and grade 2, not a lot to talk here, and the fact that they're just like strong, simple consistency, and they also have good shenanigans like with the bind zone and whatnot. So they're just what Steam Maidens needed. They needed more card representation, and it's a kind of card representation that gives them name representation. Now, the fact that the cat is not a Steam Maiden does hurt name-wise. It really does, but you know, you're still gonna run it because it searches your Steam Maidens like for cheap. If it's like free, basically, it's a free plus potentially, and it also is a pretty solid booster as you build up your bind zone. And that coupled the grade 2, which is pretty easy to like get the cat because it just calls it straight from the freaking deck for primity's sake. Yeah, those are a good pair, boost the deck. And as for Alluru also boosts the deck because now you have 2 lines of play in Steam Maiden where you can go from 0 to 3 or from 1 to 4 with your grades. So that's really cool, but also the fact that it has the ability to bind cards. It's not just good in Steam Maidens, but it's also good in other decks such as Mystery Flare. This makes it more generic and a pretty good defensive option to surprise the opponent with. So yeah, that's really cool. Now, I don't think it's too busted or anything. It's really not. It's pretty fair, and it's not something that your opponent just can't deal with, obviously. But still, these cards, definitely a good boost. So I like putting them here. Also, we got Regalia support. Yeah, fancy that. They're a great boost as well, even higher than Steam Maidens. The reason being that Regalias, they are they were a bit stronger than Steam Maidens were, and that was like, that went for a lot. But the problem is that they had like a very distinct problem, and this solves a very distinct problem for them and pushes them a bit beyond where I think the current Steam Maiden threshold is. Their impact is greater. So that issue being card advantage. When you're doing things like Yggdrasil and trying to do the Norn restance and whatnot, the one thing you're not really building is card advantage. You're breaking even a bunch, and you're not really gaining a lot of superior calls or things like that, just with Yggdrasil, basically. And maybe even Norn can get you a draw, but that's all for counterblast, and counterblasts get to be kind of precious because you're not always going to like hit Var's countercharge, let's be real. So that's just that was pretty bad news. That meant that the deck was a very like somewhat high roll ride or die deck where it was just like very aggressive because it knew it couldn't like withstand a protracted game state. This helps. The grade 3 is able to call like like an additional rare to the field, as well as the grade 2 is able to call an additional rare to the field. And then Ordain Owl moves itself into Soul to draw again, so that's a lot more draw power here and being able to call to the field. In addition to, of course, having more ways to equip your divine gauges, including from the drop zone now. So yeah, the consistency and ability to gain resources is really strong now in Regalia, and that was what they were lacking more than anything. So I actually expect to see like some decent stuff from this deck. I don't think it's going to be like super meta or anything, hence why it's not here, but I still think they can have a fairly good showing. I mean, heck, if Himiko can do it, Regalia's just might be able to do it, right? So yeah, good stuff here. Now we move on to the Foxes. The Foxes, also really great stuff. Putting them up here. The thing about the Foxes is they're just so good generically. As a Legion effect, they're like purely rear guard or Vanguard. You just take your you take your pick. They're purely versatile. There's not any specific van or rears. That's important because that means it doesn't matter where you put the grade 3. You just get to do it. You just get to do it. And now, not only do you get to do it, but you get to do it in a way that boosts a lot of different decks playstyles. Let's take a look at something like Polaris, right? Polaris needs numbers. Well, your Foxes are actually able to get a little bit big. In particular, you're able to make your Researcher Fox pretty big because you can Soul Blast one to give it 10k, and then every time you mill a card, it gets around 5k, yada yada. It gets pretty big. That's cool. Boost Big Belly a bit because then you can get a couple units that are like over 20k for the restance. You can even do this in Isabel and Leopold, which we'll talk about in a bit, because they casino effects out, and then that of course will boost up your Researcher. But it's the main benefit that I'm going to talk about, which is, oh boy, Researcher's ability to search out another copy of your grade 3. Really cool, dude. It gives you more options in a deck like Polaris instead of just having to do Polaris, because now you can just like Persona Ride and stuff like that. It also is able to give you the extra Big Belly if you couldn't get a grade 3 in Soul just like by turn 3, so that's definitely important. Giving you Isabels can use on play skills, that's really cool. If you happen to ride the Tester Fox, you can just add another Tester Fox so you can use its on play skill all over again. So yeah, these are just really solid units, not to mention just that little bit of recycling matters in a deck like Great Nature, not gonna lie. So yeah, good stuff overall. Leopold. Leopold's going to, it's essentially going to be the top of like this tier. So yeah, Leopold on paper is a really powerful unit. Just casinoing 1 in order to get all of his effects, as long as you've locked a Leopold, is a really powerful skill. Just getting that extra excel is of course exciting. Getting those 2 extra superior calls, like dummy plus, and the front row buff is a great way to combat the main problem of a deck like Great Nature, which is the excel issue of I can't hit because my boy here hit a defensive. Oh well. The one thing that's keeping this here is that Leopold lacks a finisher. I don't know how this deck wins necessarily. In testing, I was able to just like farm up a ton of resources, but that was really more for just attrition and being able to attack a bunch every turn. That didn't really lead to any sort of big win con. The closest I ever got to a win con in this deck, to be fair, is Mathtilda, and even then it wasn't that big of an issue for the opponent to deal with. So even though it goes in very quick and aggressively into the game, it doesn't strong arm the opponent into any sort of particular victory. There's not a winning image yet for Leopold, and that's what's holding it back. So in order to truly unlock Leopold, we need to give it a dedicated finisher. That's what I think. Okay, moving on to probably the first one here. Yeah, he's the first amazing unit. We've got, of course, Holy Shine Dragon. So, Holy Shine or Holy Jesus Super Crap, because this thing is way too much right now. I don't think we needed this. Its ability to search Percival from the deck is like Bushy slapping the fan base into the face. Like he just goes, you thought us reducing the Percival to 1 was going to make us stop from making it consistent? Yeah, no, we're going to make it super consistent by giving you a 4-of searcher from the deck for it. Like, yeah, that's pretty freaking dumb. And if that wasn't it like also gets to superior call 2 units off the top 5 you're at limit break, and that limit break also affords you to be able to recur from the soul back to hand, which is very easy to do, especially since Gold Paladin, I'll tell you right now, does not have soul issues. They build soul really easily, especially with things like Aglavel, which, what do you know, is a part of the Percival engine. So yeah, just the fact that it has this Percival interaction just means you get 3 excels potentially on your first grade 3 turn. That's not even a little bit fair. That's too much. That's basically like what Percival already was, but now, oh my god, you get even another excel on top of that. And Percival even has like a somewhat relevant skill giving 5k when he's a man, so that's online too. So yeah, not even fair, dude. This is not a fair card, I think. How splashable it is debatable, but yeah, it's not fair at all. If they do something about Percival though in this ban list, and I'll be real with y'all, this was the main reason why I wanted to hold off in this ban list, like this tier list initially, was because I thought Percival was going to get even more in V, but we'll have to wait for that. But as things stand now, if they did hit Percival even more, namely banning it or errataing it, then this would probably be chill, and it would make for great Liberator support. And at that point, I would still say it's somewhere around here or here, because oh my god, even if you include the Percival interaction, it's a fantastic unit. On the opposite token here, we've got the tail side to the head side of the coin. Yeah, we low rolled with Chrome Jailer, boys. I'm sorry to say it, but Chrome Jailer is not good. He's fundamentally flawed, in fact, and let me explain that. So, as a lot of us, more, veteran players would know, right? Although I'm not really a veteran, if I'm being honest. The thing is that there's a thing called Persona Blast where you discard a copy of your Vanguard from the hand to activate a powerful ability. Chrome Jailer does that, and his ability is essentially you can spam the top card of your deck based on the number of, like, cards you have, like not like cards on the field, but how like many open spaces you have on the field. That's pretty cool for like insane plussing. But not only is it basically at random because you're excavating essentially and to call on the field, you can choose not to call some stuff, but then you're just detracting from your pluses. Yeah, that's an issue consistency wise, because not only does that mean that you could hit a lot of triggers and that's like really bad for your value, but there's another issue, and it's the main issue. Persona Blast is not good in V usually. The problem with that, I think we kind of get it, but the problem, guys, you want those gift markers. And what happens if you Persona Blast something? You don't get to ride them next turn. No gift for you. And let me just say, this is especially problematic in a deck like Gold Paladin, because not only do we like RXLs, but there's not a lot of ways to freaking search a grade 3, dude. As a matter of fact, just looking over it, this deck is so preoccupied with calling from the deck to the field that it hardly searches. And when it comes to grade 3s, basically it's just your grade 3 searcher. If you don't get Gorbaduck, you're out. And this isn't even that splashable. Some people said, oh yeah, well, Chrome Jailer, I can put that in Duke and splash it in for a finisher. No. You need 2 copies of this to even have it function primarily. That's not good. That's half of your Chrome Jailers if you manage to put in 4 Chrome Jailers in the deck that already runs a lot of grade 3s, such as Sagamore, Mock Slash, Full Cavalier, yada yada. So I don't see you running 4 of this unless it's a dedicated Chrome Jailer deck, because you're not going to have the room for a Persona Blaster like this. And yeah, its other effect is cool, power, crit, drive, whatever. Just play Duke. It does that anyway. So yeah, I put it up here just for the memes, but really Chrome Jailer, yeah, it goes to the bottom of the barrel. It's just fundamentally flawed. I don't think there's a lot of support that could like give it, to be honest, because I think even if you gave it support, there's just so many better options that work with how V plays anyway that it's just not going to go well. So now we're flipping between the top and the bottom with golds, because our final gold paladin is Duke Reverse. Yeah, Duke Reverse is pretty sick, man. I'm so freaking happy that they chose him. I mean, I kind of figured in the back of my mind, like, they could do it, but it's like Agravain Reverse or Palinor or Ezel, but I held on to the copium saying Duke Reverse, Duke Reverse, Duke Reverse. Duke needs it. He deserves it. He should have it. And look here, guys. We held the faith, and our faith has been rewarded. Here he is, and he's great. So yeah, here's the thing about Duke. on paper, it seems like he's like a pretty cool unit, you know, getting like those restands, but there's a lot of CB cost behind it. He does lose a drive. You know, it seems like a pretty balanced unit, but this thing is actually kind of cracked. When I brought up my impact thing, I mentioned that a card may not seem that powerful, but in the context of a deck, it could be extremely powerful. And this is just that. Duke, without the 3 Percivals, because now can only run 1, has been in a little bit of shambles, right? Because Duke as a deck has been a bit more Vanguard centric, but aside from that, it had kind of weak Vanguard, not weak Vanguard attacks, but had like weak rearguard attacks. And it just needed like more rearguards to try and poke and pressure as much, and Percival really helped with that. It also gained consistent access to Aglavale, which was a stronger rearguard attack usually. So with that out of the way, it sort of fell by the wayside a bit. It's not really like terribly meta right now. It's more like a tier 2 deck, I think. This is going to like really help with that. Duke Reverse has a lot of benefit. Not only does it fill in those missing grade 3 slots, but it refocuses the deck, because as I mentioned before, the deck is meant to be Vanguard centric, and now you have a real finisher that's like Duke on steroids in terms of finishing power for the deck that you can go into. After all, this thing's main effect to counterblast 1, lock 3, and restand with -2 drive, that's not once per turn. That coupled with the 10k in the crit means that swinging with this like 3, even 4 times is possible, and that will really like go after the opponent's butt, bro. It's going to just shing and try to murder them really aggressively. It's a great finisher. That, and also it does have the superior ride from the hand effect for that sort of like LOL GG, I got it dude sort of effect. Which just looking at this thing's got like a similar terror that, you know, when drive checking this, your opponent is going to be sweating bullets. And they're going to be sweating the bullets that they would have sweated if you swung with RFD and drove check RFD reverse, because they know what's coming. That superiority from the hand can straight out kill them. That's really devastating. So yeah, just so much offensive pressure, and it brings a new breath into the deck. Like, the deck will get revitalized because of Duke Reverse, and it was meta before. It may or may not be like meta again because of this, but it could at least be rogue. So yeah, he's definitely going up here. Alif, bottom of the barrel. Yeah, right around here. Yeah, Alif, not much to say here other than the fact that it is cute. I do like the fact that they brought back an old unit like it. Like, I was pretty hyped to see this and like, oh man, now this is a throwback. But he's not that great. Main reason being that, sure, okay, it's cool that he can get like a lot of power and he can have embodiment share the power, but he's very reliant on having the like embodiment Alif package, but that package is neither very consistent nor very good, so that limits its potential severely. And when you add on to the fact that the main thing you can do to make this more powerful is run Dauntless, that makes it kind of sad, because basically every other Kagero deck other than Overlord can run Dauntless. So yeah, you can run Dauntless Reverse on Dauntless, which is optimal. You can also run another Kagero here that I'm going to bring over in just a minute with Dauntless and get better results than Alif presumably. And need I go on? So yeah, Alif, bottom of the barrel. He's still a cool throwback though. Now we're moving on to a pretty solid card here, which is Dragonic Overlord. Yeah, so Overlord got more buffs, and it's in the form of a card that isn't necessarily stronger than the Cross. As a matter of fact, it's just support for the Cross. What it really doesn't outshine though is the end, but it still has its uses. Let me explain. So one of the things with the Cross is a common counterplay strategy against it was to rush it early, try to give it a lot of damage and beat its ass as soon as you possibly can. This is an anti-rush strategy because its main skill is active when you've got Limit Break. So not only will you be able to retire a lot of your opponent's rear guards, a potential 4 in fact, but then you can still give 3 Vanguard attacks that have a strong clapback because it also generates a force marker when you do all of it. And you don't even lose card economy. Dragonic Overlord, the Rebirth, is a plus. It doesn't even minus its drives. Yeah, isn't that crazy? An Overlord that doesn't minus its drives is pretty freaking nutty. So there's a lot of high power output. The one thing though that keeps it from being just like may join the meta rank in my opinion is that this card is more of like a 1 or 2 of like splashable thing. I don't think this is going to be that impactful, because remember, the name of the game is impact, and I think a lot of the times you're still going to prioritize the end for the cross, and this is more for like the kind of niche situations that help balance it out and keep it in the game despite getting hit hard. So it's a retaliation unit more than anything. So yeah, it's really strong. It's just not like what I would say like, oh, the most amazing unit that's going to like bring life into their decks or something. So yeah, he goes here. Pretty cool guy. Yeah, similar to Gold Paladin, Kagero also got a really mixed bag. Here's Goku. Yeah, Goku even worse than Alif, if you ask me, because even though you can say that it works with Dauntless better, that's debatable, but its skills are just so lackluster, dude. I mean, just a simple like, oh yeah, pop a couple rear guards, 10k to a rear, make it stand. That's all it does. It's just like, oh yeah, and give it a drive by counterblasting and pitching a grade 3. That's awful. And I just look at this effect as a whole, I'm like, I'm bored with it. It's not great. There's a lot of other stuff you can run in Kagero that's way better. Just play Blade Master, play Overlord, play freaking Alif at this point. It's even better than Goku. Yeah, there's not a lot to say. It's sad days, dude. I don't like this card very much. I don't like it at all. It has basically no potential, if you ask me. Like, you would have to make dedicated, I mean dedicated support that really bump this dude up, and I just don't see that happening. So then, we're moving on to Glendios. Glendios is going into this tier, but he's the very tippity top of it. He's right on the edge of pretty good. I just don't know. He's in limbo state between. So let me explain. Glendios is actually a really faithful unit to the original, right? A lot of his effects are basically just upgrades of what original Glendios did. He still has the win con, he still has the Omega Lock, which is the main difference, is how you get the Omega Lock. He still buffs up his like reverses, and he locks when you call it reverse. That's what it does. The thing about Glendios is, for as powerful as it is, it really focuses on a win con that's hard to achieve, and it's a slow deck that's somewhat bricky. After all, let's keep in mind, reverse units are all grade 3s. And the thing about grade 3s is you're going to have to run a lot of them because you need to run a lot of reverse units and you want to see them a lot. So I've heard estimations of somewhere around 7 reverse units. That definitely will fluctuate up and down, but that's like the idea. So if you run 4 of this and 7 reverse units, already 11 grade 3s, you're going to hurt your ratios on top of that. So yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know about this one. He is still like kind of threatening because being able to lock the front row and then Omega lock that, because keep in mind, your locking is your choice, that is pretty devastating and can help grind out the opponent, but I'm not sure if this one is better in benefiting from a grind state than, say, Chaos Breaker is. So that's why I will put him here. He's not bottom of the barrel because he does have a lot of like good power potentially, and the cards that came with them are really nice consistency pieces that support the reverse game. Like, they really beefed up things like World Lion Dragon and the other 2 like cards. Like, they actually really incentivize reverses. The problem though is that they're going to need a lot more than that, because as a deck it just doesn't feel like the main way to play Starvaders still. It's falling by the wayside, although I will, in premium, this thing with Death Starvader, like I think it's like Loop Glendios is the name of that stride. It is pretty nuts, so I just want to give a shout out that in premium this thing's kind of threatening. But yeah, I digress. So yeah, Glendios, he's going to need more to bump up here. He could be considered the bottom pretty good. It depends on how well you pilot that kind of a deck, but it feels like it'd be kind of a mess right now. So, gravitating towards a pretty freaking good reverse unit, we got Giraffa reverse. So yeah, Giraffa is going up here. Yeah, let me just say, I've complained for a long time that Megacolony had a big problem, and it's this. We get a lot of neat cards in our recent support waves, right? You know, we get stun, defense, utility, resources. We get a lot of that stuff. You know, the one thing that we don't get though, raw power. And what's the thing that holds Megacolony back as a clan in V? Offense. That's the thing. Megacolony has so many gimmicks that it balances, anywhere from the mill strategy to cradles to paralyze and just on, right? Those are like really scattered, and they tried their best to tether it, but they've been ignoring the ability of Megacolony to finish games, and that made Antlion such an important unit for a long time because it's the closest thing you had to a finisher. But Megacolony didn't do its job well in buffing that thing up to an extremely high amount. Like, sometimes you can get it pretty big, but that's only sometimes. Giraffa Reverse saves the day because it's a potentially big restanding Vanguard that buffs your front row by increments of 15,000, dude. Yeah, that's really strong. And it has a pseudo hand rip, because if your opponent doesn't want this thing to restand, which gives you free twin drive all over again. If they refuse to rip cards from their hand, they're going to let that happen. But if they do rip cards in their hand, then they're going to rip a lot, because generally speaking, when you ride at this guy, you're going to start with ripping 2, but then you could rip 3, 4, even more, depending on how many grade 3 drafts you are. So after a certain point, they're gonna like really hurt by that. And if they rip cards in their hand, this leads into you buffing up your front row a bit, which can then just lead into Antlion hurting them big time, especially since Giraffa is getting grade 3s into the soul. Antlion uses grade 3s in the soul. It's all synergistic. This even changes my perspective on the battlers, because Battler S in particular, being able to make them call a card from hand and having them draw, yeah, I thought that was a pretty bad, because, you know, there's a filter, but now it's a main phase way of initiating Giraffa's reverses skill of locking a card above the front row. So now, even without giving your opponent a decision of hand ripping, you've already got a strong front row, which means that when this thing is attacking, it's going to be swinging for at minimum 27 both times. That's pretty freaking good. So yeah, he's definitely a strong unit. We might actually see a bit more from Megacolony now because of this. So yeah, I'm really hopeful for him. Now we go on to another pretty cool unit. We got Ryoji. She's gonna be going right next to Kiriel. So yeah, Ryoji is another way to play Stealth Fiends, and it's, in my opinion, kind of a better way to play Stealth Fiends, because it's a lot more stable and consistent, not nearly as volatile. Because her whole method is harkening back to Shadow Stitch. That's how you play her version of Stealth Fiends, and there's a lot of good benefits that come from it, and I do like her personally. I've played her a fair bit. She's one of the ones I've played the most in this clan collection, just by virtue of the fact that she's reignited, like, not even just reignited, just ignited a little bit of a love for Murakumo. Not that much, but she's the first Murakumo deck that I actually like and want to play. So enough said there. Ryoji, though, is only going to go into pretty good, because here's the thing, she needs more support. She needs more Stealth Fiends that work with her, because right now, one thing that hurts this deck is that she herself is not a Stealth Fiend, and you want to run Shiryukis right now, and that's not also a Stealth Fiend. So it does hurt the Stealth Fiend consistency a little bit. You can't run the promo with this, because there's no way you're going to hit it off, and also, when you peep top 5, you may not always get, like, good Stealth Fiends off of that. So there is a little bit of an issue there. However, it's the big issue that I'm going to bring up, which is power. This deck has very low power swings, and that makes sense because it's Shadow Stitch, but still, even though you may benefit from the opponent getting defensive, because then you can be like, oh, I don't hit, activate effect, oh, I don't hit, activate effect. When you play this deck, and I've played this deck a fair bit since it got revealed, that's going to do a little more than have you spin your wheels. That defensive still effectively shut you down. You just got to, like, recover from it a bit more than the average Joe. That's it. So this deck has low swinging power, and it needs to solve that. The grade 2 helps, but it's not enough because it's too specific and it's too low. By the way, Fright Cycle, yeah, still the MVP. So Armor Break goes up here. Ridiculous unit, basically Hamio for Narukami. Yeah, that's really what it is. Gets a lot of power, gets a lot of crit, has Sentinel Restrict, very frightening. Yes, CB3 is a big cost. Guess what? You can budget for that. You can afford that, especially since its Sentinel Restrict goes off when it's at like 4 or more damage, hence Limit Break. You just don't use up CB until you hit that Limit Break. Your opponent can deny it, but like at some point or another, they're going to have to bring you at least like close to that. You know, they're gonna have to at least bring you to 4 or 5 and try to go for game, and if you can prevent them from going to game, then oops, they've led you into your main win con. I mean, hell, look at decks like Duke and look at decks like Revengers, right? You can't really just honestly say deny the Limit Break is a tactic that's going to keep you alive forever. It can work sometimes, but not all the time. So yeah, this thing is just a monster. Having all these extra 10Ks, right? Assuming you fulfill all of its effects on just say like a normal like Force or Protect clan, which doesn't have additional rears, you're looking at a card that with boost from behind could be anywhere from 50 to 55 like K power with 5 criticals and Sentinel Restrict. This thing is the definition of a one-punch card. This is an OTK on legs. It's scary. The thing that makes it not quite as busted as Hamiel as things stand is that in Hamiel's deck, which was Gavriel, you were able to get a lot of rescue checks and also use abilities such as Abdiel and Gavriel herself in order to buff her up, not just with trigger effects, but with the effect of other abilities, which gave her and other units power. So she was really, really big. She usually doesn't have as much criticals, but you don't really need that many criticals to kill the opponent. She was still big as hell, and then CB3 for the Sentinel Restrict. Yeah, this is only saved by the fact that Narukami doesn't have a lot of ways to buff its Vanguard. I mean, you can ride over a Detonic Sting, but of course, like that's a little bit situational. And then there's smaller ways to buffing it, but generally speaking, it's kept in by that. Still though, absolutely take your opponent by surprise with this. Absolutely throw a copy or two into a deck if you feel like you have space for it, because oh boy, you will have this thing win you a game here and there if you line it up correctly, because it's just that sacky. So another Narukami card, although this one's not quite as good, this is Steve. So let's talk a little bit about Steve. Steve, and I think I'm gonna put Steve right around here. Yeah, so Steve is a pretty cool card, you know, being able to like bind the front row, which is more or less like staple, is pretty cool, and getting the extra excel and getting the extra card is nice. That does mean that you have pretty cool interactions with a lot of your other Narukami units. That said, I have a gripe with him. He has a limit break skill that does not fit limit break. Being able to call in a unit and get an extra excel is really cool. Don't get me wrong, it is really cool, but having that be your limit break is weird because it's essentially resource generation. Resource generation does not fit that kind of a skill because limit breaks means you're like near the edge of death and you want to push hard. Limit breaks are generally finisher skills. They're pressure skills. They're not that. So he's really odd that way. He still interacts with other cards such as freaking Dragonic Descendant. He interacts with that card like fairly well. He even has a little bit of a premium implication because should Stunburst get banned because of another Narukami card we're going to talk about, he does actually work with Exterminate because he does binds during the ride phase when he's placed, so you're able to open up your opponent's front row to have Exterminate get full benefit, so he's really good there. And we could always get the retrain of Steve's Barber to make him even more powerful, so I'm going to put him near the end of like the good unit. He doesn't boost like his deck that much, but he's still like a pretty cool unit overall. He just has like, he's sort of like held back because there's like superior options and his limit break is weird. So now we move on to Vowing Saber Reverse. This card is nuts. Not only is it basically the most blatant version of power creep we've seen from Bushi in a long time, being able to just have Vowing Sword's main effect and then do more, this card is also just a lot. He has Trishula's effect, but Vanguardified. It's a bit costly to do that effect, but still, not only does it rip resources from your opponent, but it doesn't activate his second effect potentially. Sure, you could say, oh, they'll just bind triggers, but if they're binding triggers from, say, the hand, then they're usually giving up on a defensive card, so that's still an oof for them. And if they're binding a trigger on the field, then, man, I don't know what happened to them. They probably are not in the best position anyway if they're doing that crap. So it's not that much of a downside. And it also has the audacity of a limit break that restands the entire field, much in the same way that, like, Genovius does. That's ridiculous. The one saving grace for this card is that not only is that a limit break and is that like a counterblast and a soul blast, but your Eradicator cards in V are not that powerful. They're not big numbers, so even though you restand the entire field, if your opponent hits a defensive, you're kind of locked out for the most part, so that's good. But if your opponent can't hit a defensive because they're near like death anyway, then you're basically done for. This thing gets so many attacks, especially if you combine it with Dragonic Descendant, because then you can get the restand Dragonic Descendant, which then allows you to activate the limit break a second time when you swing with it, because that's not once a hard once per turn. Yeah, that's really, really bad news for the opponent if they're near death. So for all these reasons, yeah, he's just straight up he's just Vowing Sword, but way better, and he just completes himself. Like, this man is so like goated. He's not further along the meta thing because even though he's a really, really, really strong unit, his impact is not the most meta worthy when you consider the idea that Eradicators, while they have really strong removal and control, they still don't have that much in terms of offensive power aside from the Vanguard themselves. The rear guards are still weak, and so that holds them back being an Excel clan and all. Okay, so now we've got War Deity. War Deity is going right here. War Deity is really good at Shurikaiser support, but it's also a card that just screams great. He restands the field, so he's in the same club as Vowing and Genovius, yada yada. The thing about him though is he doesn't need a limit break for this thing, dude. He only wants the opponent to be at grade 3 or greater, so that's a much easier skill to apply most of the time. And he's a superior ride to get you more excels, and he can get you the ability to stack a card on top, and he's just really good days. And the thing that he has in terms of a restand over something like Vowing is that he has good numbers with this restand. His restand gets a lot of good numbers because let's keep in mind that Sazanda, that promo for Extreme Battlers, is going to net you a lot of power. So your front row isn't even weak. The thing that keeps him here though, and not just in the busted category, is for just being a Nova Grappler unit that's generic. So you really just work with generic Nova Grapplers and do what Novas do best, which is to say you don't really gain a lot of card advantage and you can't endure like a protracted game state. But your main win con is just overall a lot of like restands, and more than anything your win con is just trying to make sure, is just hoping that your opponent doesn't guard perfectly, because if your opponent misjudges what they have to guard, they will die to it. But if they judge things correctly and throw in a bit of control and like offensive pressure back, you might not be able to survive that. So it's a bit high rolly, if you will. He's still really strong though, and low-key I think a lot of people play him, and for good reason, because he's really fun to play. Okay, so Nova Grappler is going to end off on a really low note. Here's Ethics, Master, Extreme. Oh wait, no, there's another Nova Grappler card. Never mind. Anyway, Extreme. Okay, so here's the thing about Extreme. I'm really sad about this one because Extreme was such a cool card, guys, but it's not it, Chief. Look at the cards I just brought up and their awesome field restands. His restand is not nearly as good as theirs. Not only is it way more costly with a counterblast and a discard, but it counts the grade of the card that you drove check, and it's only once per turn, and it has to be a beast deity, and the only thing you can stand is a unit with the same grade, and its limit break, oh my god, its limit break is that you can just stand all of your beast deities of the same grade. And that's it. It gives a little bit of power if you have the cross-ride bonus. But other than that, that's it. Too specific and overly costed for an effect that's weaker than these. What the hell? I don't know why they cucked him this hard. He's just bad. You can't really save him either, because as laughable as this is, something that's just like probably better than him is Ethics Reverse, which is the reverse version of himself. Why run Extreme when you can just run like Reversed? And how about you run other Nova Grappler decks, like, I don't know, this one. It's not good. There's not really anything you can do to save it, dude. And that's really sad to hear. I'm really sad to say that, but it is what it is. Okay, Cosmo Lord. So Cosmo Lord goes right here. Cosmo Lord, pretty cool rear guard, and also I guess it can be backup Vanguard. Its skill is very like nice and simple in the same way that Enigman is, but whereas Enigman has a lot more like power being a Vanguard and has like finishing potential, and also has a lot of Enigmans coming presumably, Cosmo Lord is just a generic option. He's a little bit costly when it comes to using him as a rear guard, but as a Vanguard he is sort of a neat card, but he's very basic. You may run a copy or two of him just in some decks for more like equalizing your restands out and having a misride, but like not losing to a misride. But that's about it. So it's not that he needs a lot more support, although I guess if you do like want to give like more to the Cosmo Lord like subclan, you can, but really it's just more here because it's, it's mad, it's just like, it's just a generic card that may or may not see play. So yeah, like if you want to put him in pretty good, you can. I wouldn't argue with that. I just not like terribly impressed by him. He's pretty neat though. Okay, so now we're going on to the evil token support. Yeah, Fugen, pretty solid, dude. Power and crits to your front row is a great freaking way to adapt tokens into the offensive style. That, along with taking a coin out of Kyriel's book and getting you an extra marker, presumably to protect 2, is awesome. That, again, is balance in attack and in defense. And that's not to mention the fact that this thing could potentially work with Hanzo, although I don't necessarily recommend it because Hanzo just seems far different. Even though it could work with Hanzo, the main thing it works with is the previous evil token support. That's where this thing sort of outshines Kyriel, is that the evil token support is a lot more defined, and it's a lot more well put together to be a complete deck than Kagero is right now, because basically everything in your deck can just say something about evil tokens or just being good with tokens, and then you've got a good like offense with it. And you can also combine this with something like Tachikaze or well, actually not the Crow, because it just got banned in V for JP, so they might do that for English. We'll have to wait and see. But you still have access like Tachikaze and Fusen Congo. Fusen Congo being a really great option because giving a crit to Fusen Congo means that you're able to have it kill from 4 damage instead of 5 damage. That's pretty cool. So there's a lot of finishing power here, and it's just an aggressive interpretation of a deck that had a fair bit of like support to it. So he's down here. But evil tokens are not like super powerful, so he's not passing up these guys. Okay, Battle Sisters. Yeah, Battle Sisters, pretty similar vein. Gonna put her right in front of the Steam Maidens, but she's basically relativistic to the Steam Maidens. Yeah, Battle Sisters got a good card. And actually all their cards are good. Being able to stack, get more power, get more advantage. They're all basic like shenanigans of Battle Sister. But the main thing that Fromage Reverse brings to the table is being able to really push forward your main win con, which is your grade 2 Trifle. Trifle comes with a Sentinel Restrict and a little bit of power for herself, and that's sort of how you win a lot, is you stack like crits on Trifle a la Hamiel Gabriel style, and then you just Sentinel Restrict them with it and kill them. It was sort of a weaker Hamiel, but the benefit is that you get a lot more draw power and consistency, so you can be more assured to say, oh yeah, you can just try it again. So yeah, this gives you a lot of draw power, but just the fact that it stacks the deck, and also Coco stacks the deck, means that you are able to more likely get that double crit, and you will be running 12 crit in this deck because LOL protect 1 equals able to use crit sent without feeling bad about it. So yeah, just stack your crits, put them on Trifle, test to see if they can guard it. If they can, tank it, go again next turn. It's not the most explosive strategy, and it feels like really good as like a mid-roll option, but if you don't have your Trifles, then you start to like struggle a little bit, and you'll have to go into a very like dicey attrition game. So that's why it's just more like down here, because these are really great boosts to like Battle Sisters. They're not like super like, oh my god, Battle Sisters might be rogue or above, but I mean, hell, they could be rogue, but it's still like a really great direction. I think Bushy went 3 for 3 on these Battle Sisters. They all just do what you want from them. And yeah, I guess also like quick shout out to Mocha. Being able to have defense and power are great like aspects to Battle Sister. She's another like fairly good beater for you if you don't have Trifles. So yeah, it's all good days there. Sarah, so Sarah goes to the just like the bottom of meh. Yeah, like right now, either here or here, take your pick. Sarah, here's the thing. Bad on paper, even worse in context, but actually can have a saving grace unlike these, I think. The thing about Sarah is its grade 3 gimmick is cool, but it's misplaced in a deck like Pale Moon, which doesn't really have a lot of great grade 3 rear guards in V. You can go for regular Lucia to get like 10k power. Your Pop-Off Chimera, which is a new grade 2, is technically a grade 3, and you know that can get power as well and soul charge you potentially. Then you also have, I guess, Comicality to get a counter charge. There's not a lot you can do with it, so it's not explosive. Its multi-attack is a little bit bad because you have to drive check a grade 3, and your deck can't stack those grade 3s, so you just have to straight up just RNG your way into a grade 3 for the drive check in order to call 2 to rear. And again, these aren't very explosive rears, and there's not a lot of comboing with it. So, I mean, yeah, there's not a lot you can be done. The thing is that, like, Sarah really is at the bottom here, like, of this tier, because, yeah, there's a lot, like, there's so much that needs to be done, because unlike Glendios, which is actually like pretty cool on paper but does need support, she's not that great on paper because her restand's too specific, and yeah, her little boost to the rears aren't like that big of a deal. So she's going to emphasize the whole a lot more for her. So yeah, that's where she is. Ashley, yes, go up here, right here, queen. Ashley and the new Jewel Knights are just obvious meta contenders. Jewel Knights were already like impacting the V meta as it stands, and these just give more. The grade 2 and the grade 1 are going to be ran like just probably just as much as you can, and why not? I mean, Jewel Knights suffer from a big problem. even when you had Salome and her Jewel Knights come. And that was name consistency. It was a high roll deck because Salome needed like a lot of like Jewel Knights in hand in order to like call over, get the like the call overs in order to not just get you some more resources from whatever you called over with, maybe it's like power or draws or whatever, but then you get to also restand Salome, and so you get like a 6 attack turn, which can lead off into a 7+ attack turn if you use Ashleys, if you got more soul for it. It was a very explosive deck, but there was no guarantee you're actually able to fulfill that because you didn't have a lot of Jewel Knights. With this bunch, you can now run a deck of like just all normal units being Jewel Knights. You just have 12 grade 1s, 12 grade 2s, and 9 grade 3s. Boom, easy, simple deck building right there. So really ups the consistency of a deck that's already pretty much meta, although it's not like Prism level meta, it's more like tier 1.5, but we see it, we definitely see it. It's on the level of like Revengers and whatnot. So like if you're like talking right outside Prism, which has a little bit more representation, like if you just say Prism is like not like, if you just say Prism is just a little bit higher, or even if you say it's the same tier, then yeah, this is just straight up a meta deck along with like Revengers and Gurgwave. But yeah, Ashley Reverse also noteworthy. Ashley Reverse as a unit, at first I was a little bit like, huh, you know, it's a kind of a cool finisher. But the more I've played with her, or rather just played against her, her Sentinel Restrict is terrifying and actually manageable to pull off because you get a lot of intermittent soul charging as you go through like her effects, just by virtue of having a lot of your Jewel Knights do soul charging effects. So yeah, that Sentinel Restrict actually a big deal, especially if you ride her over original Ashley, meaning she's going to get a crit in addition to all the power she's going to gain. And let's also keep in mind the fact that riding over Salome also gives her like power and drive, so she's just as threatening. So yeah, this is a cool finisher. Some people have like argued just running like Ashley Reverse centric decks and like not doing Salome, because Salome is still like a bit more specific, and you could go for that. Like you honestly could go for that, but I think running all three is still the move to go. You just have to manage like when to ride into what. But yeah, just amazing support here. These Jewel Knights just godly, amazing, one of the best things ever. Okay, so now we move on to Spike support. Spikes, well, let's talk about Juggernaut Maximum. Yes, Juggernaut Maximum. He's going here. So let's also throw in Skydiver, and with Skydiver, I'm also going to talk about Reckless Express. And I guess I should also mention that King Serpent wasn't on here, but King Serpent just belongs to be right around here. You know, pretty cool like resource unit, may or may not get used. Depends on like what deck you're using. Maybe a particular deck is going to see more use of him, but right now I only really see him used in like maybe Night Rose or Pinot Noir. Anyway, enough about King Serpent. So Juggernaut Maximum. Pretty cool unit, but he's somewhat limited right now. Being able to get the restand of the Vanguard column is cool, but then you kill a lot of your resources. You could restand a Rearguard column and keep your resources, but then you still Soul Blasted 3, and restanding a column is not exactly the most aggressive thing Spikes can do right now. So you're probably going to want to restand the Vanguard column, especially since Agile Fullback can attack from the back row, so that's 2 extra attacks yielded. But then it comes to the cost of resources. I feel like I'm on just a perpetual loop with it, but trust me, I'm just being real with you guys. It's kind of an issue. But you could also say, well, hey gods, man, just use Rising Nova, best card in the clan, right? Literally just combos with any other like set of grade 3s you got. Yeah, that's cool and all, but keep in mind this is Soul Blast 3, so that combined with Rising Nova as a Soul Blast 4, that's something even Spikes is gonna feel, dude. So I don't know about that one, Chief. And plus, Rising has like a lot of like other effects that you could copy. So even if you did decide to go for this guy, that's a really like high-powered play that's very costly that you're probably aiming for. So I don't know. He still has a cool like effect to give you defensive like elements too. So maybe this could have a little bit of premium implication since you can just stride over it, but I don't think so. You're still probably gonna do Rising. So he's still just pretty good. But if you ever find a way to power up Jugs' abilities, like if you find a way to power up the Vanguard with Rearguard's effect, then definitely send it Jugs' way because he can use that very well. Skydiver, just basic support, recycles, and then has the Wonder Boy effect. I mean, it's about as like, it's pretty simple. It's pretty simple good stuff. Like it's just pretty good. There's not like unlock the potential, but him along with Reckless Express are just like, they just do what Spike Brothers likes. They're just in a bit of a different flavor. I personally like Skydiver as an alternative to Jugs because I think recycling cards, albeit their normal units, is a great way to keep your plays going. But it's not always necessary. You can even like water down your trigger sack potential. So yeah, he's definitely debatable. And Reckless Express, well, Other than as a great grade 1 ride target, which there's not that many of in Spikes, he's just kind of a neat plus, so you could run him, but I think Spikes like want something that's like more either power or combo, and he's not really either of those things, so he's probably not going to see much of a place. Okay, so I'm actually going to just save the shadows for last, because I don't know, preferential bias. Let's talk about Tachikaze. They go to the top of the good unit. Yeah, even above Giraffa, but ever so slightly. So here's the thing. Spino Driver versus like just feels like very much on the edge of busted along with his Ancient Dragons, because fronts are really solid in Tachis when you use them with true Ancient Dragons, and now you have given them Tyranno Legend, which can ensure you the front, and you've given them this mother effing grade 3, which turns all of your Ancient Dragons into true Ancient Dragons, and turns all of your true Ancient Dragons into super true Ancient Dragons. So your fronts are also your crits, and we were always benefiting the fact that it's like, oh, well, I mean, hey, it's not like they may or may not hit it. Now you have more of an assured way of like hitting it thanks to Tyranno Legend. And if that wasn't bad enough, this thing is a +3 when you cross ride it, dude. Yeah, it's a +3 in addition to what, like, and that's just from its own effect. It's not including the fact that you get to use Spino Driver's effect when ridden over to get an excel and a couple draws and call. And then this even gets to gauge 3 units. It has the audacity to do that. There's just so much coming from this unit, and the only excuse that we have, like, to like say it's not like, oh my god, this thing could like blast the meta a little bit, is the consistency aspect. It may or may not go off, and yes, its main skill is locked behind a limit break, so maybe if it uses up its resources too much and you can't defend very much, then sure, maybe you can like push past it and kill it, but it's so threatening, dude. I mean, getting like 7 attacks, all of them with like crit? What the heck? And they all get like a front bonus, so like you better like budget to be at 3 and then hope that when you go from 3 to 5 you get a defensive, you can block the rest and then kill them. That's basically how you do it, because as things stand, this is just wild support. This has to be the top, because this is almost borderline like on the meta busted side of things, but even if not, this is just such an upgrade to like Tachikaze, because you've melded the Ancient Dragon and true Ancient Dragon style and given them fantastic support that just elevates them so much. Like, these are definitive cards for like both of those decks in V. So yeah, it had to go there. Neo Nectar. We're almost at the we can see the light at the end here, can't we? So yeah, now we see our good old pal friend, the Neo Nectar cards, which was Gradial, although I'm just going to call them like the Gladial cards because I think it's based on like a flower, that name, so let's just go with that. Anyway, the Gladial or Gladial, I actually, whatever, right? So the Gladial cards are a nice new ride line, and it's a pretty cool surprise because we just like came off of a lot of Musketeer cards, so weeding off of that we went back to plant tokens, more specifically the buffed up plant tokens. And you know what that means? That means Arbros cards. Yes, this works really well with Arbros. I have been doing some testing with this, and this deck is surprisingly consistent. You just run your grade 2-3 Arbros along with having your starter be the Arbros starter. That's really important. And also probably running like Oliver just for more like pushing power. And then you just run this ride line on top of that. And then beyond that, you just run things like Wisteria and Grade 3 Searcher, and suddenly everything you have in your deck is not only a great ride, but it generates you like some sort of resource or advantage or power. So yeah, it's cool. The thing that puts it basically at the bottom of the good unit is that it doesn't necessarily need new support because there's a lot of plant token support, but it's also in a weird position because it generates so much advantage for free. Like, this thing is like a free +2 with its recycle. That's nuts. But for all that advantage, you're not getting too much pushing power. You get 5 attacks potentially. It's a little bit specific. You have to call over plant tokens and things like Wisteria and the grade 2, what's his name? Timber. Yeah, Timber and Wisteria can generate you other cards mid-battle when you do this effect to get better columns. But then that's about it. Force 2 might give a crit, but then, you know, they're not like too powerful. So it's very mid-rolly. It's a very mid-roll deck that's super consistent but doesn't have like high-powered plays at its disposal. So if it got more high-powered plays, then it would go more up here. But as this thing's down, it's just like they're good cards. They're just good stable cards for a deck strategy that could use more cards for it, meaning plant tokens. So that's where I stand with it. Attain, down here. So like that. Like that. Okay, so anyway, these three are basically interchangeable at this point. Attain, I'm going to put a little bit ahead right now because this is marginally more useful. So the thing about Attain is that Attain is a witch card, and witches in V are a soft subject because they don't have nearly enough support, but she still has a pretty neat effect, which is like a defensive ability to get rid of an opponent's stand rear guard by retiring a couple witches. But this effect, while it seems pretty solid on paper, and it is like kind of solid as a disruption option, it's got a couple major flaws contained in it. For one thing, asking to retire 2 witches means it's not very generic. You could, for like, I say this more as a meme suggestion than anything, call Nemain off of Nemain, retire them for her effect, smile. But in all seriousness, yeah, this is just a witch card through and through because of that. But let's be real, in a very similar vein to Megacolony, witches did not need defensive options. They needed a win condition. They needed a strong offensive push, and a strong offensive push they would want if it also gave a reason to have their grade 0 gimmick. The only reason you do the grade 0 gimmick is to buff off of the effects of Fianna. That's pretty much it. Even the promo that you get mills the opponent's deck and has them call grade 0s, which is really good support for a gimmick if that gimmick actually gave a damn. So yeah, this doesn't do anything for your gimmick. It's kind of a neat rear guard, being able to attack a bit more, but even then, other than just having like a 5k attack, it gains intercept and the ability to not be like removed, which are just defensive options all over again. So as harsh as this is going to say, I'm just going to quote one of my buds that from like Axis and just say straight up that this card just makes a deck like dude, this card is just gives you the joy of taking even longer to lose with witches. Yeah, that's this card. That's it. You're just delaying the inevitable. That's pretty bad, dude. But with a lot more witch support, maybe it's a cool defense option. If witches were actually worth something, then you could run this. But as things stand, it's going down here because it does little to a deck that does little. Okay, now we're gonna start out. Okay, so we started off pretty strong, and now we're gonna end off pretty strong. Here's Eldona. Yeah. What did you guys expect? This thing gives crits to your grade 1s in a Luard deck as soon as turn 3 if you suck it in a Souled Nightmare Parent. That's a borderline busted interaction. I'm not sure for sure. I'm not like for certain if this is going to be like enough to put Luard as a top tier deck, like a top tier deck, like basically Arm Wrestling Prism again. We'll have to see when it releases and see some JP results. The JP results may not be that reliable because JP still hasn't caught up to Luard even after their ban list did nothing to it. So maybe JP just doesn't like Luard that much, and we'll have to wait until the West gets it to really see Eldona's merits in that deck. But even so, it's just a really solid option for it. The fact that it counts as a grade 1 in the drop and the deck means it's also fantastic Claret support. And in a Claret deck especially, you're going to use all of its effects because its ability to retire and then gain you card advantage is good in a deck like Claret because Claret may not kill like immediately, so it will need the ability to survive an extra turn. So yeah, just generate advantage from the mains, whatever you call the mains, just get rid of your little donut, get more hand advantage, turtle up, then kick the bees next turn. So yeah, that's a pretty solid card right there. It's just it's an amazing unit. It's good generic support for the grade 1 side of Shadow Paladins, and it also adds a layer of consistency by being able to like add a grade 2 or greater off the top 10, which is exactly the kind of problem you would expect to face with decks like Luard and Claret due to their greedy grade 1 ratios. So yeah, overall, just one of the best. He's basically contending with Holy Shine. I just think Holy Shine is a little bit more guaranteed to just be like over the top because of Percival, but this one's just definitely being like a part of the meta rank for the most likely. So finally, we're gonna end off with my favorite unit this set, which is Dragruler Phantom. Dragruler goes here. So yeah, Dragruler is just a Revenger that's good in a deck like Revengers that are already good. Yeah, really, it's as simple as it is. here's the thing about Irregular. It won't do much for a pure RFD strategy, but not only does it boost the hybrid build, which is in fact a fair meta contender. We don't see it as much as pure RFD, but it has done tops. I mean, how one of them being yours truly. But this also has the unique potential of putting a pure Mordred deck back on the map. Pure Mordred may have some devastating plays in store, because doing a lot of testing, this just gives Mordred a good fallback option while also furthering the plays, because Mordred suffered from a couple of big weaknesses. It didn't get the ability to restand unless your opponent was grade 3 or greater, and no Blaster Darks equals no game. This solves most of those problems. You can ride this first if you want, because it doesn't need Blaster Dark, and even though it can work with Blaster Dark, it also works with just generic Revengers to give you 5 attacks that are pretty big numbers. So yeah, that's pretty cool. Being able to also ping a damage and call a unit from the deck for the free is really good for keeping up the pressure in the late game. So as just a finisher, he's also just in his element. Irregular is just fan-freaking-tastic. We're not sure if Mordred will hit the meta scene as a result, because Mordred is such a great unit and this is the perfect companion for it. But we'll have to wait and see, because RFD is just such a goated unit. RFD, I believe, is still the most goated unit in V Revengers, but this is such a cool addition for more than one version that I think, yeah, he's just great on paper, and he's gonna help him, like, at least one of the meta contender decks, like, get a little bit more meta. I mean, what else can I really say about it? He's a great card, and I'm glad they chose to reveal him first, excluding Alif, which was more just like, you know, an appetizer, a teaser. This was our first main reveal, and for good reason. Okay, so then that's going to do it for today's tier list. It's definitely a long one, and I do apologize that I tend to ramble on a bit, but then again, that's just sort of how my content is. I want to give all these units the time of the day and really explain why I made this tier list the way I did. I think this tier list is more or less very sincere to what we should expect from these cards. A ban list over in July could change a couple things, especially from the top here, and also some test results may prove that some of the more mid cards could be better than I thought, but far and away, this is probably about as reliable as a list as I can provide at this time. A quick shout out to Mick McGain right here. That is the guy who made this tier list, much like how he made the other Clan Collection tier list. The guy's really goated. He gets on this super early. I'm not sure how, but I just want to like shout him out again for being able to have this tier list, because I don't want to mooch off of someone without giving them their due credit. All right then. With that, let me just say that this was a really good set. I really like this set. There's a lot of solid units and above, and this is probably one of the hypest like sets that we got in recent times. If not the, and it's not just the hypest clan collection. V got a lot of strong units on the top here, and even like these guys over in the top end of the second tier, they're really powerful cards, dude. Clan Collection Volume 5 and 6 did wonderful, and I think it did raise the ceiling of this freaking format just a little bit. I mean, if not just raised the ceiling in this format, it definitely raised the bar of Clan Collection power levels. So they put their best foot forward with Bushy. There were some downsides down here in the bottom, which was a little bit disappointing, but at the end of the day, you can't make it on without cracking a few eggs, right? So this is where we're at. I'm very happy with this set. Even if we didn't get any hints for them, I guess that just added to the surprise factor, but I'm just really pleased with them being able to just give a lot of sweet ass cards. Okay, so look forward to a deck profile on my boy Duke, and then a deck profile on my boy Irregular, more specifically the hybrid build, because that's where I specialize in Revengers. So yeah, look forward to those. That's going to be my next step in this channel, most likely. I'm definitely working on Duke, almost got it finished up, so I'm preparing a really nice profile with good detail and just try to provide an in-depth understanding of the deck, because I feel like not a lot of people play Duke, and even the ones who play Duke play it on a more simplistic basis. They don't really try to go into the deep and gritty on like combos and numbers and interactions, things like that, and just like, you know, the kind of the meta dog-ish aspect of the deck. So I want to be able to provide that, so that's where I'm going with this next. But I'm not going to take up any more of your guys' time. That's about it. I really hope you guys enjoyed the tier list. Put in a lot of effort, and I hope you guys we'll come to appreciate, you know, a lot of these units here, because Bushy did our best, so now it's time for us to do our best in testing them. If you have any comments, suggestions, critiques of this list, do leave them down below in the comments section. And if you'd like to see more Vanguard content like this, then do subscribe down below and turn on that notification bell. And with that, take care. God bless.